Welcome, Freda Liu, to our podcast, Rewrite the Rules. I'm really excited to have you on board with us. Just for our listeners, Freda is broadcast journalist, speaker, and an author. And intentionally, I'm going to pause there and I'm going to turn to her to tell us a little bit more, because she's definitely much more than just these three words.
Okay, so yes, definitely much more. I was born in Brunei. I grew up there until I was 14. From Brunei, my father retired and we went back to East Malaysia in Sarawak in the island of Borneo. And during that period, I decided that I wanted to do a degree in marketing, right? And so back then, many moons ago, that was considered a radical course, right?
Okay.
But I started my career back in Kuala Lumpur, and I was in PR for the longest time, working for a consultancy called Edelman. I'm sure people will know that. I was there about 4 or 5 years. And then the thing is then to go into the client side where they pay you a little better. And I worked for IBM for 11 years, after which I joined a business radio station called BFM. And I was there for 15 years. And during that period was when I started doing other things like writing books, speaking, moderating, and a lot of other things. But I think at the crux of it, communication would probably be the underlying thing that I did.
Oh, very good, very good. How was the shift from IBM, like corporate job, to radio?
The reason I did that was I was happy at IBM, but I was just thinking, you get to that regional job and it's like, is this it? And so when the radio station came about, it was a startup, unheard of. Radio is not a new industry. But what was very interesting was the first talk radio. It was the first talk radio and it covered business. So it's not just an entertainment show. And I was like, I love learning. Why not give it a shot and see what happens? I was very fortunate. IBM actually gave me a 2-year sabbatical.
Wow.
And allowed me to work elsewhere. I took a 30% pay cut.
Right.
And then in about 18 months after the job, they said, do you want to come back? I wanted to try something new and just... and I'm so glad I did, right? It just opened up the doors and opened up my mind to so many things, right? And sometimes I think a lesson there would be, you have to take 30% pay cut is a lot.
Yeah.
And the security of a reputable company to something completely unknown. But it was just a chance that I had to take. And I was like, why not now? If it all didn't work out, I can always go back to work, go back to the corporate job, so to speak.
As you look back now at your career or life in general, have there been any pivotal moments, incidents which made you rethink, rewrite, reflect?
Yeah. Or I think the pivotal moment for me was actually after leaving from IBM to BFM was one thing. And then I went through a divorce, right? I went through a very, 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 very painful period in my life at that time. And I was like, okay, what needs to change? And I realized that I wanted my life to be a little bit more complete, right? One of the things that I do every year is to look at my wheel of life.
Yes.
And beyond the career, your finance, your family, your friendships, right? I mean, as much as you don't like a divorce, but if that didn't happen,
right,
that probably didn't wake me up to looking at my life more holistically. And it's beyond money, like even like the job satisfaction and all that. I think that was a pivotal moment for me.
Yeah.
I used my birthday every year as a point to reflect on the year that was and what the year is going to be moving forward, because life is precious.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about, you mentioned Wheel of Life, and I'm familiar with it, but I'm sure a lot of our listeners may or may not be familiar. So can you talk a little bit about Wheel of Life?
So my wheel, during that period, maybe I can relate it back to that period, was to look at, there are things called your faith, your fitness, your friendships, your family, your fun. Yeah. You actually have to schedule fun and say, I've got to switch off. Just this 2 weeks, I've just switched off.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult when you think, missed opportunity. No, you have to schedule fun, right?
Yeah.
So I looked at faith first to fill my soul, right? And it's really about, if your cup is not full, you can't do a lot of things, right?
Yes.
So whatever your faith may be, whatever spiritual anchor it may be, look at that. I think that's most important. the second thing I looked at was fitness, right? Fitness because, it gives you happy chemicals.
Yes.
Naturally created chemicals,
Yes.
right? So then that was the second thing I looked at. And the kind of friendships that I want to have and some that I choose not to have anymore. That's important. Family, the kind of relationship at that time when it happened, my son was about 6 or 7. And I know that, a mentor once told me, children are temporary guests in your household.
Oh, I love that.
So what kind of relationships do I want to have with my child? And that has to be built at that point, right? At 6, 7 years old, and of course, age appropriate, when he became a teenager, you have to look at how do I have to nurture this relationship, right? So these are the things I looked at, right? And I said fun, finance, women, look at your finance. And every year, and it's not just about growing your finance, right? You got to look at your insurance.
Correct.
Women, we got our bits and bobs extra bits and bobs that men don't have.
Yeah.
So I take a look at this. I take stock of this every year and fine-tune little areas that I need to work on.
Right, yes. So Wheel of Life, for those of you probably have not heard of this, is basically a circle and you divide that into these 7 key parts or 8 parts, all the things that Freda already mentioned. And then you rate yourself from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 and see where, how you're doing or which part needs more focus than the other.
Yeah.
I think it's a wonderful exercise to do. Have there been any phases in your life where you felt you were, let's say, more productive than the others? And I use the word productive in a very broader sense.
Yes.
And what drove that?
Okay, so like every year as I go through the Wheel of Life, there's certain areas that you look at, right? So one year it was, okay, let me finish a marathon. So I did, right? But it was the amount of work that you had to do before then. So like, so there are things that sometimes like you have to do the big, hairy, audacious goal.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm not doing a marathon next year, but I'm looking at different things, right? So that's not a big, but like I need to have more muscles. So like that could be a small one, but maybe there'll be 2 or 3 goals that is a little bit more of a stretch that I look at every year. And then I like, what area of my life do you want that to be? Right? So it could be, like I said, another fun goal that I have is I want to go to all the continents in the world, right?
Nice.
2 more to go. So what do I have to do to be able to afford that and then work backwards, right?
Yes.
So like 2 or 3, a little bit more of a stretch goals in different areas, and then other things to still continue, fine tune it, up it a little bit, that kind of thing. But every year I think you need 2 or 3 of these big goals that stretches you, and not just necessarily be your career.
Yes, I agree. So what's happening now? What stage are you in now?
So this year, I got into 2 teaching roles.
Oh, wow.
One in India, one in Dubai.
Okay.
And it is something that I've never done before, right? I'm teaching communications in India. I'm like, isn't that bringing coal to Newcastle? I don't think Indians know how to communicate. But anyway, that was something that stretched me, right? And it was different conversations.
Yes.
It's not the conversation that I would have with my fellow Malaysians where I'm very comfortable, but that will stretch me. And then going to Dubai is happening soon, and I'll be meeting with 45 international students, right? And it's just something that will stretch me. Right now, and I got appointed into a board role. So that is also something really different, right? And it was something that I thought about 2 years ago. I would like to try a board role position. What would that entail, right? And so it's a big learning curve.
That's good. So many new things. Freda, our podcast, Rewrite the Rules, is the listeners, majority are emerging women leaders from all walks of life, right? What are some of the things that you've intentionally done during this journey from where you started to from where you are right now that you think others can, of course, I agree we all have our own journey, but others can learn from?
Okay. I know one of the things I did was actually understanding my values. And I know that learning is a big thing for me. And I love that. And I think that is something that your education definitely doesn't finish at school, at university. I've gone on in my role while I was working in radio, taking a course in design thinking. Why? Because it's just different, right? Yeah. And I will want to learn the principles behind design thinking. I went to the Futures Institute to learn to be a futurist. What does it take to be a futurist? What is the thinking behind that? And I think that's important. I don't know whether you've got the latest iPhone, but there are some people who just get the latest iPhone or whatever phone every year. I don't have an iPhone. A new phone every year. Now, if you expect that of a product, shouldn't I then, if I'm using your services, that you are the latest version of yourself?
Yes.
Right? If I'm still stuck talking about things that happened 10 years ago, I'm not relevant. I think that will be one of the things that people have to continuously do to learn and just to upgrade yourself, because you've got to be an improved and upgraded version of yourself every year.
Right.
Right? So I think that's one thing. The other thing is like, I guess I'm curious, right? But if I'm a curious person, don't be afraid. So if I took design thinking, right, people are afraid to try new things. But if you take design thinking, hey, I'm just a prototype, right? I'm trying something. This prototype didn't work. Let me try another. Let me improve on that prototype, right? One of the things that I tried as a prototype that didn't work, and I don't think I'll improve on, is pole dancing.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, not working.
Yeah.
Don't want to improve it.
Yeah.
But hey, I tried it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So there you go, right? Just different things so that you use a different part of your brain and stretch yourself in different areas, right?
Yeah.
So if you just look at life that way, there's so many things to try.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So I love that continuous learning and just trying, right? Like trying not be afraid of thing, right? What has been the biggest challenge you've faced?
During the divorce, looking how to raise my son, and it was very fortunate. This is a story I share. It was very endearing. My late ex-mother-in-law continued living with me after the divorce, right? And she was very pivotal. And I always give credit that she was there for me, so that I could do the things I needed to do, but she stood by me, and so I don't get mother-in-law jokes, right? Because I really got on well with her, but she's passed on. So I think that would have been the most challenging thing. But you get into solution mode, right? You're allowed to cry, you're allowed to be miserable, you're allowed to do that. And I think that is important. We've got to process all these things. And then what next?
Yeah.
Right? And the 5 stages of grief. Like, I think divorce is almost like death, right? And you go through that, and then you go through that period where anger, that whole process, and then get to the point of acceptance. And I think like the sixth thing if you read the book, was significance, making meaning of what has just happened, right? So I think that's important.
I also know you do work with women leaders in Malaysia quite a bit. There's 30% Club.
Yes.
There. What are you seeing, Freda, as things that maybe women leaders can do, emerging women leaders mainly can do? Of course, there is one, the society, the systems, the organization. Yeah. But what can women do more of or less of?
Okay.
To kind of empower themselves, like own it. Like what can they do more to really own their own thing?
Okay, referring to another book again, get hold of it, Playing Big by Tara Moore.
Okay.
First of all, we are inner critics. We're really, we criticize ourselves the most. We're so worried about what people think. And so to me is my simple thing, if I don't affect your rice bowl, let me do my thing, right?
Yeah.
That's one thing, inner critic. Women, one thing as well, I need to do this course, I need to do this before I take on this, right? We're always before that. So we're always getting a new certification. Sometimes, we've heard that HP study, right?
Yes.
Where the 50% woman won't, 50% a man will take a role, 100% a woman will only take a role in the 100%, right? And so the statistics, change it, right?
Exactly.
Why do we have to stick to those statistics, right?
Yeah.
Change it. The other thing that women also, the good girl syndrome, right? So what happens in school is that when we do our homework and we pass it to a teacher says, good job, Freda, right? A+. So we get recognized. In the work scenario, no one's going to give you that recognition apart from your yearly review and everything. So you've got to make sure you highlight the things that you have done, right? And just because there is, just be bold about it, be brave about it, that you've done this. So recently I was, with that board role, I have this mentor who helped me write the resume for a board role, and says, the board role is not written like a job role, right? So it says women constantly, he's a guy, so women constantly do this. I supported, I assisted, and it's always that playing that back end role as opposed to I have done this, right? So it doesn't mean, and so we tend to be a little bit more
holding ourselves back.
Holding ourselves back when we've done the work, right? And doesn't make you any brash or any ruder or any more horrible because you've done all these things, right? But it's very difficult for women to be able to speak up and say, yes, I've done this. So I think that's one of the things that I would say. And don't hide behind the personality.
Yeah. I love the thing that you said about the example. Actually, your colleague pointed out about, women will write, I support it. I want to flip the thing a little bit to say, because, you're now working with boards and you interact with so many leaders, is that what is it that maybe organizations and our male counterparts, what can they do to bring the diversity, more diversity in organizations, at leadership, especially at leadership level and even in the boards now?
Right. So this is very interesting again, and we haven't seen the McKinsey report. When it makes business sense.
Absolutely.
When there is gender parity. It was like 12.5 trillion if there was gender parity, right? Whether you're in business or in the workplace. So, and it makes sense, right? And if you think about your future, as males listening in, if you think of your customers, right? You need that diversity beyond gender because you're selling to a very diverse customer base.
Absolutely.
And if you don't have that perspective, you'll not be able to sell your products and services better. So just business-wise. A conversation I had with the first chair for Shell in Malaysia is a woman, right? And she was saying it's intervention, the young level, fresh graduate level, intervention at middle management level, intervention at senior level. So find out where you're losing people and make interventions and make changes at every stage, right? And not wonder, when you've gone to middle management, where have they all gone? Because you haven't addressed certain things that affect the younger audience at that point, right? So I'll give you an example. What's happening in Malaysia is that we have more women graduates than men.
Yeah.
However, we lose them when they start having children,
yes.
right? So what in their 25 to 30 or 25 to 35 age group, right? So what do you have to do then to make sure that they continue to work continue working by providing the right conditions so we don't lose them? And even at the fresh graduate level, she was saying that there were some management trainees and says all things being equal, and they were looking at getting the numbers for females and everything. So they had to relook at all and they needed 2 more women. So when you relook at all the resumes that came in, it was very purposeful that 2 women were hired. So intervention at every stage, the issues that affect women at every stage, and make the conditions suitable at every stage.
You talked about interventions, and one of the things under the Rewrite the Rules, we offer women leadership program. But there's always this interesting debate about should organizations have women leadership programs or should they not have? Like some clients or some organizations have embraced it. They see the benefit. The women who are going through see the benefit. But then at the same time, there are some organizations who say, maybe all women leadership program, maybe that doesn't solve the purpose, or maybe that's not so beneficial. Do you have a view on that?
And that's where you need policy changes, right? I mean, this is where I appreciate Malaysia, where our Bursa Malaysia, the stock market, insists that 30%. And it was started by the 30% Club, a lot of advocacy work, and now they put that in place. Like I said, right, unless you show them the numbers, right? You show them the numbers, it makes business sense, right? What's the effect on the bottom line? If you want, it's hard to get talent.
Yeah.
You are missing out on half
the population.
Yes. If you don't give them opportunities, right? I think we're not there yet, but if you look at Japan, aging and no women.
Yes.
And so they are having, this is a crystal ball.
Yeah.
Think ahead, right? Because this is going to be the problem down the road, right? And then, of course, there are policies in Singapore with foreign employment and all that sort of thing. So what are you doing then to make sure that these won't be for future problems, right? So you're missing out on half the talent by not offering opportunities, right? So this is, I guess, I know it's tough. Especially, I know what you're talking about, those SMEs, like I don't see the point, that kind of thing. But policy changes, if you look at the business direction, everyone's moving towards ESG.
Yeah.
That's the S
Yeah.
in ESG,
Yes.
right? What are you
Yeah.
doing? And that falls under SDG 5, which is gender equality. So that's going to be a business direction. Now, if you have a business that's going to be exporting, and I guess Singapore, a large part of your business is about exporting, your customers will be expecting that from you. Do you have these ESG guidelines? Okay, environmental, you pass. Governance, you pass. You're not doing very much in the S.
Yeah.
Right? I might not work with you because you don't comply with all these ESG guidelines. So get these things in place before it becomes a requirement.
Sure.
Right? I mean,
Yes.
so I'm turning into a very businessy kind of conversation,
Absolutely.
but this is going to be the future. Expectations from your future clients or current clients, that's going to be the expectations.
Yeah. Do you think organizations should have women leadership program?
Of course, you're right.
Yeah.
Because until, I think, people say, why must we have it? Well, until we get to gender parity,
Absolutely.
then we'll stop.
Yeah.
We're not there yet, right?
there.
No, statistically, just not there yet, right? And it's not a Singapore problem, it's a global problem.
It's a global problem,
right?
absolutely.
So until we get to gender parity, then, and like I said, economically, it helps with the GDP. It helps
Absolutely.
with everything, right? So don't miss out on half the talent if you
Correct.
don't have these programs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. If you were to look back, what is one or two piece of advice you would give to your younger self?
Get your eggs frozen. Get your eggs frozen, because whether you decide to have children or don't have children, that's your decision, right? And then I think like sometimes people get married at a younger age just because the clock is ticking, right?
Yeah.
Because of biology and all that. So if you can afford it, get your eggs frozen so that when you are ready and probably met the right person or not the right person or whatever decision
Right.
at a later point in your life, and not let biology dictate so much.
Absolutely.
That's one advice.
Okay.
That's the other advice. Dream bigger. For
Yeah.
me to dream bigger,
That's
right?
good one.
I think what are the possibilities, right? And you can manifest those things in your
Yeah.
life, right? I
Yeah.
mean, when you start dreaming bigger, to think of, and thanks to technology, your life is not, like now we're doing this thing. We couldn't have done this 5 years ago.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So 5-10 years ago,
Yeah.
right? So the world really is your oyster. The opportunity is not just under your nose, it is around the world. So dream bigger.
What's now? What are
now?
the next couple of years looking like for you?
Finish the rest of the continents. That's the fun part.
Okay.
I think like time with my son. He's like I said, he's 21. We talk about graduation. Let's go somewhere for a holiday. So I'm going to look at all the things that's going to be
Yeah.
meaningful, right?
Yes.
Work-wise, there are a couple of interesting projects. I would love to be able to do more things on the global stage,
Yeah.
beyond the shores of Malaysia. But I think like just it's time with the son, travel, have fun, making, because also health, I think that's so important. We shouldn't take that for granted.
Yes.
So, and create lots of memories.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, great. Look, this is such a great conversation. I wish it would never end. I will have to wrap up. And I want to wrap up by this question. What are 3 words to describe Freda?
I say adventurous.
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 Okay.
I would say that I'm approachable.
Okay.
Approachable / friendly, right? Approachable. Possibilities.
Yeah.
Yeah, possibilities. Like I think they're just
Nice.
possibilities in the world. Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. Thank you so much for this amazing conversation, Freda. We had a great time.
Thank you.
I had a great time talking to you, and I'm sure our listeners are going to get a lot from this. But I love the conversation. Thank you so much, and keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you for the opportunity.